Right now, there's a decent chance an apex predator is asleep somewhere in your house. It has 42 teeth. It can smell you through a closed door. Its ancestors ran down bison across a frozen continent. And you named it something like Biscuit. You feed it. You talk to it in a voice you would never use in front of another adult. You let it sleep on your bed, which, if you stop and think about it for 1 second, is an absolutely unhinged thing for a soft, clawless primate to do with a carnivore. But you're not doing anything new. You're doing one of the oldest things humans do. This relationship is older than farming, older than pottery, older than writing, older than the wheel, older than the first city by more than 20,000 years. Before we tamed a single plant, before we fenced a single sheep, we had this. So the question is, why? Why would a hungry, fragile species invite its biggest rival into camp? And how did that rival end up snoring on the furniture? Let's go back. Picture Northern Europe, 30,000 years ago. Full ice age. Cold in a way you have no reference for. Out on that steppe, there are exactly two animals that hunt the same way, in groups, with planning, communicating constantly, picking one target and refusing to quit. Humans and wolves. We were not friends. We were competitors. Same prey, same tactics, same shrinking supply of calories. Which makes what happened next genuinely weird. In a Belgian cave called Goyet, researchers pulled out a canid skull roughly 36,000 years old. The paleontologist Mietji Germonpré measured it and found something off. Shorter snout than a wolf. Broader brain case. She called it a Paleolithic dog. Similar skulls turned up at Předmostí in the Czech Republic, around 30,000 years old, and in Goyet Cave in the Siberian Altai, where Nikolai Ovodov's team dated one to about 33,000. One of the Předmostí skulls had a fragment of mammoth bone wedged into its mouth, placed there, after it died. Someone fed a dead animal a meal for the road. But here's the problem. Not everyone buys it. Plenty of researchers look at those skulls and see wolves, just wolves at the weird end of normal. And the DNA hasn't settled the fight either. A 2022 study in Nature, led by Anders Bergstrom and Pontus Skoglund, sequenced 72 ancient wolf genomes and found something great and frustrating at once. Every dog alive descends from a wolf population that no longer exists. There's no living wolf lineage you can point at and say, that's the one. The split happened somewhere between 40,000 and 15,000 years ago. And the exact moment is still genuinely unsolved. Here's what nobody argues about, though. At some point, wolves started hanging around human camps. And we let them. The leading explanation is that we didn't actually do it on purpose. The biologist Raymond Coppinger argued that domestication started as a garbage problem. Humans generate waste. Bones, guts, scraps. A wolf willing to creep a little closer eats a little better. A wolf that panics and bolts eats nothing. Do that for a few hundred generations, and you are quietly selecting for one trait. The ability to stand near a human without losing your mind. And we know what that one trait does to an animal. Because someone ran the experiment. In 1959, in Novosibirsk, the Soviet geneticist Dmitry Belyayev started breeding silver foxes. He selected for exactly one thing, tameness. Nothing else. Within a few decades, those foxes had floppy ears, curly tails, patchy coats, shorter faces. They whined for attention. They wagged their tails. They licked hands. Nobody selected for cute. Cute came free. And then there's the food question, and this is my favorite part. In 2021, the Finnish researcher Maria Lahtinen pointed out something about Ice Age hunters. Humans can't live on lean meat. Push protein past roughly a third of your calories and it starts poisoning you. You need the fat. So in a hard northern winter, a successful human hunter is sitting on a pile of lean meat he physically cannot eat, and wolves can eat it all day. Which means feeding the wolf cost us nothing. So the first dog treat was the part of dinner nobody wanted. Honestly, same. I'd have taken the fat too. Now here's what makes this so important, and it's bigger than pets. The dog is the first. Not the first pet, the first domesticated organism, full stop. No sheep, no goats, no cattle, no wheat, no rice. Thousands of years before anyone planted a seed on purpose. Humans had already taken a wild species and reshaped it into something that had never existed before. That's not a cute footnote. That's the prototype. Everything that comes after herding, farming, cities, surplus, empires runs on a technique we first worked out on an animal that could kill us. And it paid off immediately. When anthropologists study modern hunters who work with dogs, the mayana and mosquito in Nicaragua, for instance, the numbers are lopsided. Hunters with dogs bring back dramatically more meat. The dog smells what you can't. It corners what you'd lose. It hears something in the dark 2 minutes before you do. The archaeologist Pat Shipman took that further with a contested but fascinating idea. Modern humans in Europe seem to have had wolf dogs, and Neanderthals seem not to have. She's argued that partnership may be part of why one of us is still here. That one's speculation, not settled. But sit with it for a second. The possibility that we outcompeted another human species because we had better friends. Then, about 14,200 years ago, near what's now Bonn, Germany, somebody was buried. A man, roughly 40, a woman, roughly 25, and a puppy. In 2018, the veterinarian Luke Janssens re-examined that puppy's teeth and found the marks of canine distemper. Not a mild case. The enamel damage points to multiple waves of severe illness over weeks. A dog that's sick can't hunt, can't guard, can't work, can't even feed itself. It has diarrhea, fever, seizures. It needs to be kept warm, given water, cleaned up after, over and over, by people who had no medicine and no idea what was wrong with it. It lived to about 28 weeks, and then it died, and they buried it with them. That puppy was useless. They kept it anyway. That's not livestock. That's family. Once the relationship existed, we started engineering it. On Zhukov Island, off the Siberian Arctic coast, archaeologists found dog remains and sled equipment from around 9,000 years ago. The dogs cluster around a specific body size, the size that's actually optimal for pulling a sled, with at least one much larger animal that may have been kept for hunting polar bear. That's not a bunch of tame wolves hanging around. That's a breeding program. 9,000 years ago, humans were selecting an animal toward a job description, and it worked so well that dogs made the Arctic livable. They came with us into the Americas too. At the Coster site in Illinois, people were digging individual graves for individual dogs about 10,000 years ago. Not tossed in a pit, their own graves. Which brings us to the thing curled up in your house right now. In 2015, the Japanese researcher Takefumi Kikusui ran a study on dogs and their owners just looking at each other. Long mutual gaze. Oxytocin rose in the human. Oxytocin rose in the dog. Same feedback loop that runs between a parent and an infant. Hand-raised wolves don't do it, they mostly avoid your eyes. We took a predator and wired it into our own bonding circuitry. And it wired itself into ours. The psychologist Brian Hare found something even stranger. Hide food under one of 2 cups and point at the right one. Your dog gets it instantly. Chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, often don't. Your dog reads you better than an ape does. So here's the full picture. 30,000 years ago, we shared a hunting ground with our fiercest competitor. The bold ones ate our scraps. The scraps cost us nothing, because we couldn't digest them anyway. Tameness dragged floppy ears and wagging tails along with it. 14,000 years ago, someone nursed a dying puppy for weeks and then took it into the grave. 9,000 years ago, we were breeding them to spec. 10,000 years ago in Illinois, we were burying them one by one with honors. And somewhere in the middle of all that, they learned to read our faces. Which is why Biscuit is on your couch. That voice you use, the silly one. The wolf figured out what it meant before we invented the wheel. That look it gives you when you come home is 30,000 years of engineering, and you're on both ends of it. Every other animal we domesticated. We domesticated for meat, milk, or muscle. The wolf is the only one we kept mostly for company. That might be the most human thing we've ever done. We looked at the one animal built to compete with us, and decided it could be family instead. If that's the kind of thing you like, ordinary stuff in your life turning out to be 30,000 years old, there's plenty more of it here.